Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Firstly, I would like to say thank you very much for this honor of being invited to speak to such a distinguished audience of academics and others. This is an invitation by the President of the Council of Higher Education, and I would like to say something about education, which was also the subject of the speech by Professor Saraj just now. We know we are proud to declare that the first message that was received by Prophet Mohamad was Iqra. Iqra means to read, and to read means to acquire knowledge. Therefore, knowledge is very important for the Muslims. That is why it is the first message that was received by the Prophet. Now, at that time, there was nothing written about Islam as a religion. There was nothing written at all when the Prophet received this message. Obviously, he has to read other writings from other people, mostly, of course, non-Muslims. He had to read all the findings of the philosophies and the scientific findings of these other people. And to do that, he had to study their language, or else he will not be able to acquire their knowledge. Over time, because of the accumulation of knowledge due to the research made by Muslim scientists and scholars, the Arabic language became the language of knowledge. And therefore, if people would want to emulate the Islamic civilization, the great Islamic civilization, they had to learn Arabic, and they had to gain access to the great libraries in Cordoba, in Baghdad, and elsewhere. That was the period when Arabic became the language of knowledge, and all people who are educated know the Arabic language, because that was the language for acquiring knowledge. But sometime around the 15th century of the Common Era, it was decided that acquiring knowledge that is not about Islam, about the religion, does not give you any merit. You don't gain anything for the afterlife by studying other subjects that is not considered to be about the religion of Islam. When that fatwa was made, the great Muslim scholars who had pioneered many findings in science and mathematics and in other fields ceased to study these subjects, and instead they studied only about the religion of Islam. And with that, they became people who are ignorant of all the knowledge that is changing the world at that time. They began to regress. Instead, at about the same time, the Europeans, seeing the great Islamic civilization, decided that they must acquire the knowledge of the Muslims. And so they went to Cordoba, to Baghdad, to learn about the knowledge of the Muslims. And they acquired this knowledge, and it is the basis for the European civilization. Because the Muslims themselves rejected this knowledge, they regress. And when they regress, eventually we find that the Muslims are dominated by the Europeans. Almost all Muslim countries fell under European rule. And from then onwards, the Muslims had become the weakest people in the world until today. There was a time when to defend ourselves, we need to get the help of others, of the Europeans in particular. This is the result of the wrong interpretation of the teachings of Islam. We find throughout that there are many, many people who translate and teach Islam which are actually not very Islamic. Today we are seeing the results of this ignorance or not taking the teachings in the Quran as our principal guide. We are more inclined to follow our leaders. We are more inclined to follow our scholars, the interpreters of Islam. Even when their interpretation of Islam is actually against the teaching of Islam, we would accept, because these are the scholars and these are the leaders and we must follow them. One example that we see today is that we as Muslims are brothers and sisters, but we don't regard each other as brothers. Indeed, we are now fighting each other, killing each other. The Quran says very clearly that to kill a person is equivalent to killing the whole of humanity. But we kill people, and we kill fellow Muslims, something that is very much forbidden in the Quran. We do this gleefully, as if this is part of the teachings of Islam. And sometimes, having killed a fellow Muslim, we declare, God is great, Allahu Akbar. We do something that is forbidden by Islam, and yet we claim that it is in the interests of Islam. It is not. What is happening now is that we have disregarded the principal teachings of Islam as found in the Quran. We are more inclined to accept the teachings or the interpretations of certain individuals who may be in a leading position at that time. And so it was that the Muslim regressed in terms of education over the centuries. They regressed so much that they became very ignorant of the advances being made in the sciences and in mathematics. And without this knowledge, we cannot make any progress. The Europeans, on the other hand, having acquired the knowledge of the Muslims, were able to make tremendous progress using their scientific knowledge pioneered initially by Muslim scholars and scientists. But it is the Europeans who benefit from all this knowledge, while the Muslims disregard this knowledge as not essential for their community, for their development. Over the years, we see the regression going on and on until today. We find that Muslims are doing things which are forbidden by Islam, believing that they will go to heaven because they are jihadists. They are not jihadists. They have done things which are against the teachings of Islam, and because of that, they don't deserve the heaven that they believe they will get. Education is very important, and higher education is most important, because it is at that level that you begin to do a lot of research and findings that will benefit humankind as a whole. Of course, some of the results of the research are used in order to develop ways of killing more people. We have reached a certain stage where we can actually destroy the whole of human civilization if we have a nuclear war. That is what will happen. We have seen the results of 2 nuclear bombs dropped on Japan. And until now, we still have people suffering from the radiation caused by the explosion of the nuclear weapon. We are now very interested in devising, inventing new ways of killing people. If the amount of money that we spend on the development of these weapons is spent on research, on diseases and other things, I'm quite sure today the world will be a much healthier place to live in. But we spend more money on research in weaponry. Of course, it is legitimate to do research and to develop in order to defend yourselves. Without the capacity to defend, then we would be overcome or dominated by other people, and even our faith would be threatened. We see wars being fought by people who had no weapons of their own, but have been buying weapons from people who have no good interest in our well-being. That is what is happening today. Firstly, because we disregard the true teachings of Islam as found in the Quran, and we instead follow certain trends, and we become so weak that we are subject to influence which are not good for us at all. We hope that Turkey would lead the way in bringing back the knowledge that is essential for our well-being. Of course, Malaysia would like to work with Turkey because between us, we may be able to improve the lot of the Muslims. I am very glad indeed that I should be asked to speak this morning, and I hope that I can make it clear that Islam is not wrong. The religion is not wrong. It is only the interpreters who cause the wrong teachings to be spread among Muslims to the point where we blame Islam for our backwardness, for our failures, whereas it's not Islam at all. If we follow the teachings of Islam as found in the Quran, we will be the most successful people in the world. We will be very strong, we will be able to defend ourselves. But because we have disregarded the teachings of the Quran, and instead we follow the teachings of individuals and scholars, on some scholars, because of that we have regressed, and we find ourselves being dominated by other people to the point where we cannot govern our own countries, to the point where Muslims leave Muslim countries in order to seek refuge in non-Muslim countries. This is something that should not happen, that Muslims should leave their own country in preference for the countries that are non-Muslim. This is because we have not followed the teachings of Islam. And I hope that this council, as well as others who are interested in the well-being of the Muslims, should promote the teachings of Islam as found in the Quran. And as found in the Quran, if we follow, then we will be more successful, more able to defend ourselves, and more advanced than other peoples in the world. So I would like to say thank you very much for this opportunity for me to speak out on what I believe is happening today in the Muslim world. Inshallah, if we realize that we have gone wrong and we correct our ways, we will still be able to revive the great Islamic civilization of old. I thank you.